Today on Outside the Box Reviews, we are taking a look at the NECA Universal Monsters Ultimate Invisible Man figure. This is based off of Claude Rains', I was going to say appearance as the Invisible Man, but I mean, he doesn't really do a whole lot of that. But his turn at the Invisible Man, the original Invisible Man film back from the 30s, one of my favorite Universal monster movies. And as usual with these figures, one I was very excited to be able to get my hands on. Thus far, despite some of my gripes about the Universal Monsters line from NECA, they've been really consistent with packing in a nice variety of things like head sculpts and hands and stuff of that nature, and other accessories as well. So it's definitely kept my anticipation of each new release high. So let's jump into this figure and take a closer look at what we can see of him. Jack Griffin comes with a variety of hands, mostly these hands that are kind of in the tighter fitting brownish tan gloves. So you have a pair here that are kind of a looser grip. One of them will hold a little beaker accessory he comes with. You could also kind of double these as relaxed hands. They're nicely detailed. You can see there's a lot of wrinkles sculpted into them. Taking a look at the palm side, pretty much the same kind of detail you'd expect. Not a lot of paint variants here. They really are just the one color more or less, but I think they do look good. We also get a slightly tighter gripping hand. Same basic idea, just a tighter pose of the fingers. And if we flip that over, we can get a little better view of what that looks like here. This is mostly to use with the toupee, and I think you might be able to use it with the nose. I'm not entirely sure. I haven't tested it just yet. You also get a pair of fisted hands. Same basic story here. And then flipping them over, it's weird, the hand, I guess it would be his left hand, the fingers look really defined. His right hand, I don't know if maybe it's just the way the light's hitting it, they look a little softer in terms of sculpt. Nothing terrible, but it is a little bit different. We also get a pair of hands with like heavier gloves on them. I believe these are what he's wearing when he comes in from the snow at the beginning of the film. So you can see these have a lot more detail. They're a darker brown, but they kind of have the different lighter shades mixed in there, and even darker washes into the cracks and crevices to really give them that aged leather look. They also have the kind of cuff at the back of them. The left hand is more of an open or relaxed hand. The right hand is kind of a pretty tight grip. If you flip those over, you get a little more look at the detail there. I think with that kind of cuff on the glove, it may be a little more of a pain to get these to articulate properly on the figure. But these really just seem like an optional set for certain looks where you're not really going to be doing as much as you will with these standard hands. We also get his little toupee. This is when he's starting to unravel his wraps and everything. He kind of throws this at the crowd around him. It's kind of a soft rubber piece, more or less flat. It does have a little bit of a curve to it to give it some depth, but the detail's nice here. It's well sculpted. There's some nice washes in there to kind of bring out different levels of brown within the hair. And it does have a nice kind of sense of 3D-ness going on. And if we flip it over, this side is a little more concave, but you can see more of that same kind of detail going on here. We also get a nose. We actually get a couple of these. One comes in the main blister with the figure, and there's another two taped to the back of the blister packaging. This thing is so tiny that even with this macro lens, it's still really hard to see much detail on here. While the nose for the Invisible Man is a bit of a larger piece than like a standard human nose, it's not a whole lot bigger. So this is a super tiny accessory, probably why they included multiples, just because you're likely to lose it. And yeah, I'm just hoping I don't lose it 3 times. We also get his goggles. Now these are on one of his head sculpts permanently, but the other 2 don't have them. So we have this kind of pair that's made of a flexible rubber so that you can add them to those displays or just have them taken off of his head. They're pretty nicely detailed. You can see the dark lenses on there, the kind of gunmetal gray of the main body of them. We'll take a closer look at the sculpt when they're actually on the figure itself, but just to give you a rough idea of what these look like off of him. As I mentioned before, we get his little beaker. It has a little metal stir coming out of it, a purple liquid that's kind of almost glittery looking or enamel looking inside. The rest of it's kind of a clear container. Pretty nice little accessory. In the macro view, you can see there's a lot of empty space at the bottom of the container, but overall I think it looks pretty good to the naked eye. It just kind of is blowing up here, some of the little tiny flaws of seeing it so zoomed in. And then last but not least, we have his book. Even zoomed in, you can see the writing in here is all just kind of gibberish. Nothing really that you could decipher out of what's in here, but the book has a nice sculpt on it. If we take off the macro lens, we can see it has kind of a good little page texture going there on the sides where it's opened up. You can see the cover coming off to the sides looking good. And if we flip it over, it is just kind of a blank book cover. But this is nice, not just for this character, but this is an accessory that could definitely be used with multiple different figures to achieve some definite cool looks, or even just with diorama building. Testing out the tighter gripping hand, he can actually hold the nose, but I wouldn't trust him to hold it, especially because it matches the tone of the gloves so much, the paint color, that I really feel like you would just not get enough impact out of potentially losing it and having him in this loose grip with it for it to be worth it. As for that wig, we have kind of a Goldilocks situation. The left gripping hand actually holds it, but it's a little loose, while that tighter gripping hand will hold it, but it's a little tight, and I'd be worried if you were going to use this to hold the nose, that having him hold the wig for too long might stretch his hand out and cause it to not always be able to hold the nose at all. So, pick your poison here, I guess. And as I mentioned, that wider grip hand will hold the little potion there pretty well, or science concoction, whatever it is. The photos and the packaging show him holding it in the left hand, and I was having trouble before, but let me try again. Alright, well, yes he will, but he doesn't look like he has a great grip on it. It doesn't look super convincing. It looks like it's kind of just floating in his hand. So I don't know if the packaging photo was a prototype and he decided to switch that mold of the hand to the right instead of the left or what, but I definitely would say the right hand's more made for it. Before we look at the head sculpts and everything on this figure, I did want to point out one of the gimmicks they show is removing the hands and the head and having it look like he's completely invisible with no gloves and no facial wrappings or anything. My initial reaction to seeing this in the promo photos was that it was kind of a cheap win for them where they could just tell you to take off the stuff that's already supposed to be removable and then get a different version of the character there. But I have to say they were at least very smart about the way they went about this, and I have to appreciate it. While obviously you can see there are peg holes inside those wrists, they did do the smart thing and make sure the hands had pegs attached to them so that there aren't any like ball joints sticking out of his wrists or anything like that. Along the same lines, they actually seem to have lowered the ball joint at the base of his neck, making it a lot easier to hide underneath the collar. So from this view, you can't really see it. If we pan up a little bit, it's a little more obvious. There is a black plastic ball inside of there. Kind of would have been cool if they molded it out of white plastic so that it could have hidden a little bit easier inside there. But overall, I think it's kind of nice that they did pay attention to that kind of detail in putting this figure together. So we were able to get this look out of the character as cleanly as possible. We get 3 separate head sculpts with this figure. The first one is kind of the more classic look. He's got the goggles on. These are the permanent goggles that are attached to the head sculpt. The nose also is attached to the head sculpt. So he has the bandages wrapped all over his face. Not a whole lot of paint detail going on in the bandages, but they are a nice color and help convey what's going on here. The detail is nicely sculpted as well. You see the little tufts of hair sticking out from inside the bandages, relatively cleanly painted. Spin around to the back, you can see one last bit of hair and the continuation of the band from the goggles. As with a lot of these Universal Monsters figures from NECA, it is a 2-piece head sculpt, so it is a head and then a separate neck piece, but the head and the neck go together when you do the head swaps. As I mentioned with the separate goggles, these are kind of the same, almost like a gunmetal with dark lenses, little bits of silvery accents on them. They look really good, and I think overall the entire design is basically what I'd want out of this figure. Second head sculpt we're going to look at, I guess should have actually been the third because it was the last look of this version. This is when he's peeling everything off and throwing it at the crowd that's jeering at him. So here we have the very hollow face. The eyes, nose, and the slit for the mouth are all opening to a hollow inside of the head. This is really cool. This is something that I'd wanted on previous releases of Invisible Man figures. I think Diamond Select talked about doing one or teased one. I don't know if it ever happened. So I'm really excited to see that NECA has given us that full 3D effect going on here with this version. Similar to the other head, we have the hair sticking up. It's a little more ragged this time, sticking way up on that one side. But overall, very similar in look to that other head, just a lot more disheveled looking. You can even see that the bottom, the bandages are kind of peeled up a little bit more. I don't know, I just really love how you can see that depth in there and really get that effect of the character. Which really wasn't even something we got in the movie, because in the movie, it was just like black velvet on the inside of the mask to hide his face, and really to use anything where they were blacking stuff out, if I remember correctly. It's been a minute since I watched the making of this. But it's definitely more depth than you got with 1930s effects. As I mentioned, you can put those goggles on. I have a hard time getting them to sit right. I think it's because there's no nose, and I'm sure you could probably try to wedge that nose underneath this, but I just don't think think I'm going to be able to get it to stay. Because there is no nose pushing up on the bridge of the goggles, they kind of do angle down slightly. I also do have an issue a lot of times with the band on them rolling as I try to put it on the head, and as much as I try to correct it, it's really hard to get it to not do that. So I figured I would leave it on here for right now and mention it. I got it decently on that side, but you do definitely have the risk of it rolling a little bit. Personally, I don't really need this look with the goggles on. I kind of just like having the goggles as an accessory, so I'm not too upset if this doesn't work perfectly for that gimmick. I should also mention how I'd said before that they have the lowered neck peg to help hide it when trying to have the fully invisible mode. It does mean the head comes off a lot easier just because it doesn't have the depth of that peg to go onto, so it is a lot easier to pop the heads off of these by accident than with standard figures from NECA. The last head is very different. This is, I believe, the scene where he's eating. Everybody's favorite regular James Whale character actress busts in and starts screeching at him. So in this view, we actually have nothing where the mouth goes. There's just this bottom cup that pegs into the peg, and then it basically is like a big Pac-Man head sticking out there where his mouth would be exposed, and there's nothing there. Same with behind the eyes, nothing there as well. We do have a nose permanently attached here, and then as with the other ones, you have the bandages detailed, you have the hair bits. This is the only piece that does not have a separate lower ball-jointed segment to the head. So there's only the one main body joint connecting to this head where the other ones have an extra ball joint for more mobility. And as with the other head, you can put the goggles on here, the removable goggles. They do sit better because he has a nose here. So they work a little better here than they do with the other head. And actually, I like them on here, but I'm just a fan of that emptiness, and I think that's just a cool effect. And to be quite honest, out of the three heads, I think this is my favorite look just because it has the most eerie effect. For the rest of the figure, we have the very standard Invisible Man look. So we have his white collared shirt, a kind of greenish tie, an orange undershirt, and then his dark black or navy blue jacket there. There is some kind of highlights on the jacket to kind of bring out the edges, which is why I question if it's black or blue. He also does have little pocket squares sticking out of that pocket there on the front. All the different pieces of the jacket and the seams and the wrinkles are all nicely detailed. If we flip him around to the back, nothing too surprising here, just more of that detail going on. Like with most NECA figures now, the upper body is kind of a soft rubber, and then the rest of it is all kind of hard sculpted. The arms are nothing unusual. They have the same kind of detail of the wrinkles and folds going on. They come down to the elbow and then extend down towards the hands. We have some button details there by the cuff, and then a little bit of the white undershirt sticking out, and you can see a button there as well going into the glove. Basically the same thing going on here on the other side. For the pants, we have the traditional NECA diaper. You can't really see the lower torso too much, but then we can go look down at the pants and just see kind of standard gray pants. Nothing super detailed here, but they bring off the effect of being pants. On the back side, we have a little bit more with wrinkles and things like that. More of the same going down towards the lower leg, as well as on the front. His shoes are nicely detailed with some seams and stitches and things, making them look like they should fit with this. Definitely giving him the kind of, you know, higher class look that he had in the movie. And I think overall it's pretty nicely detailed. For articulation, the head articulation depends on which head you have in. As I mentioned, this one just has that one ball joint at the bottom. You can turn it side to side. I'd be very careful though, because there's not a lot of material back here, and all you could really turn it by is the top of the head, so just be careful you're not going to rip this top of the head off. Not really up and down or side to side movement, it really is just a rotation that you could get out of him here. With the other two heads, you can get a little bit down. As I mentioned, it wants to pop off that peg, so it's a little hard to get him to do anything too extreme, but he will look a fair bit down. Because of the flare at the back of the head, there's no real up, you just kind of look straight ahead. We can turn side to side, and we can pivot left and right, but every time I am moving his head to an extreme, it's popping it out of the joint, and I do have to readjust. And honestly, it doesn't even like rest in between. It kind of just flops back down in that hole. So you're not getting a huge range of motion out of his head besides just a side-to-side movement. The arms will spin a full 360. They will go out to the side, probably about a little more than 45 degrees to the body. They come in pretty tight, but they really don't go out too far. We have a single jointed elbow, but it bends basically at 90 degrees, which isn't too shabby. You will also rotate there. I did put on these heavier gloved hands, so we could see that these will rotate, and then they will hinge, definitely hindered by the bottom part of the glove. If I swap in his other hands, they will still rotate, but the range that they hinge is much, much better. You can get a lot more action out of them. He will rotate at the waist. He will bend a little bit forward and back at the mid-torso, as well as lean side to side. Everything in here being rubber does make it a bit easier, but there is a lot going on here, so it is hindered some. The legs on mine are very tight up here at the hips. They will go forward, but I don't like that sound. They'll go back, not really much at all. They'll go out to the side, and then you could rotate at the hip. You could bend at the knee, single jointed knee, less than 90 degrees there. You could rotate at that same knee, and the foot will hinge down, it'll hinge up, and it will pivot. He does also have peg holes at the bottom of his feet here. And I guess I should take back what I said. I just put this head on to do the next segment, and it popped in really solidly, where for some reason the other one was not doing that. But now you can see I can get like pivot out of his head, which is nice. He can actually hold that pose. Can't really look up still much better, but you know, you can look down a little bit more without having issues. So I don't know if I just had to work it on there a little better or what, but yeah, this head's now back on and very solid. So let me try this one. Yeah, no, this one still doesn't want to go all the way on, but that one definitely makes a solid connection. Weird. For a size comparison, I am bringing in the Diamond Select version yet again, and as is kind of normal, the Diamond version is huge. I will say, however, I like some of the things on the Diamond version. Doing a quick comparison here, in terms of like posability and accessories and everything, NECA wins hands down. They just have more of it, more options, more everything. I think the costume they put him in looks better. The articulation is miles above, because I think this was like a 6-point of articulation figure for the Diamond one. But I do like that they included more of a wash on the bandages of his face. I actually kind of like how they got a little more definition in the face in terms of how the goggles and the nose all sat. So there's positives and negatives here, but I think NECA definitely has the better figure at the end of the day. And in case you need proof I haven't cleaned up since doing that Frankenstein accessory set video, here is the nearest normal human figure I had at hand, Doc Brown. And these guys are very similar in height. I think Doc Brown would stand a little bit taller, but Christopher Lloyd's kind of a taller guy, so I think that makes sense. And then our other James Whale horror character here, Frankenstein's monster. I had to put the bandage face on him just to match these two up. And yeah, Karloff is towering above Reigns here. Overall, I really love how this figure came out. I feel like most of the things I dislike about it are just things that are hard to do, and I really don't have much better of an idea of how NECA could have pulled it off. I feel like we actually got more with this figure than I would have expected. Granted, a lot of the accessories are a bit on the smaller side, but I think just honestly with the figure and the 3 heads he comes with and his interchangeable hands, you get a hell of a lot of mileage out of this guy. I am a little worried about my copy having very stiff hips on it. I may need to give him a hot bath and see if that fixes things, but that's not going to stop me from giving this a very high recommend. I'm really excited that they gave us the Invisible Man. I'm especially excited that they gave him to us as early on in the line as they did. I mean, we got this guy before Dracula, which is kind of surprising. Granted, he should be here pretty much any day now at this point, if the delivery date's to be true. I assume by how quickly they announced the other ones that we're not going to get any kind of accessory set for this figure. It makes sense. I mean, as much as I'd love a bunch more lab equipment and stuff, what are they going to give us besides that? Like an old-timey bicycle or something? Still, I do hope, knowing that we are at least getting a variant of Dracula down the line in a different costume, that they will give Jack Griffin here the same respect, and at least give us a version of the figure in that cool Hugh Hefner smoking jacket he has kind of midway through the film. I believe Jada Toys did that, or whoever it is, it's also making those Universal figures, and yeah, I really want a nicer version of that. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below. Have you picked this figure up? Do you like it? Are you planning on picking it up if you haven't already? I'm very excited that hopefully that Dracula will arrive very shortly and I can review him as well. That looks to be another amazing release. So yeah, I'm very excited for more of these to keep showing up, and I will happily review them as they hit. That's it for this one. I'll see you guys next time. Later.